Kicking off the list at number 10, the Old Arnold Estate. If you're a horror fan like myself, then part of you probably wants to visit this Conjuring house. I don't know, like 10% of me wants to peek in. Or Ed and Lorraine's Museum of Horrors. I think I'd rather go there. The house in the film looked a lot fancier than it did in real life. It was more cinematic and they made it look even more creepy as a property in general, but that's what happens when you have millions of dollars in your budget. You're trying to make a more memorable horror film too. Now this is the real house. It's referred to by the Perron family as the Old Arnold Estate, and it's located in Harrisville, Rhode Island. On the real property, there's a barn to the left of the house, so I have to say, the original kind of seems way scarier than the movie. I don't know, barns creep me out. A lot of spiders. Aside from paranormal horrors, the Perron family also had to deal with financial ones. When the family did live there, a pipe burst and flooded their business, so they had to sell more than 85% of their new land. Number 9, witch history. The Conjuring film, the main plot here of course is a witch named Bathsheba Sherman, and it's haunting the grounds, or the house. It's a wickedly evil spirit, and the real Bathsheba was born in 1812. She married a Rhode Islander named Judson Sherman, and they had 4 children. Also, apologies if I'm saying her name wrong, but I'm kind of okay with that. I don't want this to be like a Beetlejuice situation where she just pops up randomly and just pukes in my mouth. Herbert Sherman, her firstborn, arrived when she was 37 years old. He lived a long life as a farmer, and he grew old and all that jazz, but the other 3 children that were born afterwards, there's barely any information about them at all. Julia, Edward, or George. The mother, the witch, passed away on May 25th, 1885, 4 years after her husband did. Now there are stories that her body turned to stone when she died, or it was some sort of paranormal form of paralysis, because of course over time these stories change. It's like the longest game of broken telephone. Obviously a few things here are fake, but what the Perron family did find was the beginning of something very real. Number 8, Bathsheba's gravestone. The grave of the witch was found alarmingly close to the Perron family's new home, right on the property next door. Her resting place now is in the cemetery right across the street from the fire station near downtown Harrisville. So if you're ever visiting Rhode Island and you want to maybe, I don't know, be possessed by a witch, throw that in the GPS. Enjoy, and also, good game. They didn't initially think the strange happenings were because of a witch gravesite, obviously, that's not where their mind went to first, but that's when Ed and Lorraine were asked to help out, and they knew right away that it was, well, the witch next door. Number 7, the hauntings begin. The initial incident happened a few years before the paranormal investigators were actually called in. Carolyn, the mother, she was laying on the sofa, and then all of a sudden her leg muscle started to have a spasm. Her calf was in this immense pain. She had no idea what was happening. It was out of nowhere. Then when she looked down at the ground, she saw this puddle of blood. She got stabbed by something. It was a very small puncture. And no, if you're thinking it was a bee, it wasn't. She looked and looked for a sign, anything to hint to what just happened, and she couldn't find anything. Also, it was a perfect circle. Carolyn described it as if it was a large sewing needle that went through her skin. Ouch. And in true witchy fashion, the Perron family also had broom problems. That's right, the broom would go missing or it would move place to place. And even more strange, Carolyn would sometimes find piles of dirt in the middle of a recently cleaned kitchen. You gotta love a helping, cold, dead hand. Number 6, levitating chair. In the movie, the exorcism happens at the end, of course. It's like a happy-ish ending, but in real life, that exorcism never took place. Lorraine Warren has since said that her husband, Ed, would have never performed such a thing, nor would he try. But Andrea Perron, one of the 5 children, has come forward many, many years later, and she said that she witnessed a seance with her mother, where her mother was speaking in a different language, and she also did not sound anything like her mom. Not even close, which is terrifying. And as Andrea recalls, her mother's chair then started to levitate like it did in the movie, and then after a beat, she was launched out of the chair across the room. It wasn't just Carolyn that experienced these horrible games either. As we saw in the film adaptation, the children too were busy with their own spirits. Number 5, the music box. We had to include one of the creepiest elements of the Conjuring movie, the Perron family music box. Director James Wan wanted to use this music box in the first film because, well, mirrors and creepy tones make for great suspense, but also this was a real haunted artifact from the real house. Today the box is safely stored in the Warrens Museum alongside other items that look more or less normal upon first glance, but they're actually extremely haunted. I'll get to those in a bit. This part in the movie actually scared the out of me. Any mirror scene, I can't do it. I always like eat my hoodie. They always do it so slow too. They're like, Like, I would slam it, just slam it, have toothbrushes fly out, I don't care, I'm scared. But this was real life, you can't forget that. This music box actually caused so much trouble for these poor girls. Specifically April, the youngest of the parent children. She found this antique in the house and she used it to communicate to another spirit, the spirit named Rory. Number 4, other owners. Andrea Perrin has told us that every single person who has once lived in this house, they all experienced some sort of paranormal activity. That's comforting. Some left this house screaming and running with only a few belongings. That would be me day one. I wouldn't even make it till night. I'd be out of there by 4:30 p.m. Sharp. When the parents sold the house after all these haunting encounters, the guy who moved in then temporarily to start fixing up the house, he left too. He left without his car, he left without all of his tools, and yes, he even left without his clothing. Ghosts don't wait for you to put on pants. That's what I learned doing this. Ghosts do not wait. The current owners of the 18th century farmhouse, Corey and Jennifer Heisen, bought the home in June 2019, and yes, they've already seen stuff. You may ask, who in their right mind would move into a known haunted house? Well, paranormal investigators. That's exactly who. The scariest couple ever. They're like, oh, this is perfect. Over $1 million. They're like, debit, we'll take it. Let's get new wallpaper. So far, they've actually witnessed doors opening and closing on their own, and also loud knocks on the wall. Corey, the husband, admits to having a hard time on nights when he's all alone. He says he doesn't feel anything evil per se, but the house does feel busy. Number 3, the Warren Occult Museum. I mentioned the music box earlier, which sits now in the Warrens' creepy personal occult museum. Once belonging to the Perrin family, the music box is one of many strange artifacts. In the museum, there is a vampire coffin. Yep, you heard me. A satanic idol, the Conjuring mirror. There's a shadow doll that apparently has the ability to visit your dreams and in Freddy Krueger-like fashion, stop your heart while you're asleep. And also Annabelle is in there as well, but she's got friends. Annabelle has friends. You'll be pleased to know that Annabelle is actually the least creepy of all of them. A haunted pearl necklace puts Martha Wayne to shame right next to the haunted glass eyeballs, of course. I'd love to know more about the glass eyeballs. Let's see that movie. But one of the most fascinating items in here has to be the headless T-Rex toy. Is that from Toy Story? Is this Sid's room from Toy Story? What a crossover that would be. Number 2, other incidents. A total of 8 generations of one extended family lived and passed away in that same house, all before the arrival of the Perrin family. Andrea has been quite vocal about the happenings, and to be fair, if I had a fraction of her childhood, I wouldn't shut the up. That sounds like an insane time. I would never sleep. She also confidently states that a lot of those souls never left the house. The Black Book of Burryville, which already sounds creepy, was the town's public records book at the time. And on the property there, it stated that there were 2 hangings that took place. Poison was used in a death type scenario. There were 2 drownings, not 1, but 2, and then 4 men who were passing by just happened to freeze to death on the property. Andrea has a book, it's called House of Darkness, House of Light. So if you're curious to read up on more of these happenings, go right to the source herself and support. Finally, number 1, a photograph of Bathsheba Sherman. You always see those UFO videos and they're filmed with like a BlackBerry Curve. It's absolute trash, it's like 420p, it's horrible, not convincing at all. Not even, no zoom, no effort, just Cloverfields. There's never clear evidence of anything nowadays, but we may just have a clear photo with the real witch, Bathsheba Sherman. This photo is from the Perrin family farmhouse back when it was still the Arnold estate. This was 1885, so the witch was most likely in her 70s at the time, but still, it's hard to tell. The photo is still grainy. But that's because it was 1885, right? You know, it's not a BlackBerry. This is like the world's oldest, creepiest game of Guess Who. This witch lived next door to the farm, and although we'll never really know who is who, many believe she's the lady in the middle, closest to the camera, like right over here. Also, the fact that she's wearing some sort of mask makes this grainy photo even more haunting. She's standing by herself. I feel like the vibe of that group shot was off. Like nobody wanted to stand next to the literal witch. I don't blame them. Guys, do you think the real Bathsheba Sherman is in this photo? The lady on the left looks a little bit witchy. I don't know, who might have judged?
The Perrin house was a very, very old house. Very, very old house. Now, certain families can move into these houses where phenomena has taken place, but it doesn't affect them. Other families can move in and hell breaks loose.
Coming in at number 10, we have the new owners. The Conjuring house has actually just been purchased by paranormal investigators Corey and Jennifer Heisen. They couldn't resist the opportunity to buy the property. Corey moved in before his wife and set up recording equipment to see if they could track the many ghosts said to haunt the property. However, he has claimed that he is absolutely terrified of being there alone, and I don't blame him. The Heisens recently spoke to the press in August 2020 2019, and Corey himself said, "We've had lights flashing in rooms, and when I say lights flashing in rooms, it's rooms that don't even have light bulbs in yet." When something takes a painting that's on the wall but not only knocks it down, but actually knocks it down at an angle that it lands on something and it's upright, you know what? It's really difficult to debunk that. That's what he said. The pair also claimed to have seen a black mist, heard voices, and unidentified footsteps. With a paranormal investigator now in the home, it seems like we're going to likely be hearing more from the property, so stay tuned, I guess, for Harrisville 2.0. Next up, we have the next owners at number 9. Andrea Perron claimed that everyone who has lived in the house that we know of has experienced some hauntings. Some have left screaming and running for their lives, whilst others have been kinda cooler about it. When asked to give an example, she claimed that the people who bought the house off her family, the Perron family, and begun restoration on the property actually had a horrifying experience that they didn't want to speak about. She was speaking to the Tallapoosa Journal when she said, "The man who moved in after us to begin the restoration on the house when we sold it left screaming without his car, without his tools, without his clothing. He never went back to the house, and consequently the people who owned it, the adjacent landowners, never moved in, and it sat vacant for years." I'm just asking what he was doing restoring this house without his clothes on. Just a question. Just a question. It's not a question I'm gonna get an answer to though, because apparently he is not keen to speak to the press or anyone about his experience at the house ever again. This makes me feel really icky. At number 8 we have the 7 dead soldiers. It seems that during the Perron family's time at the home, a particularly nasty spirit began haunting 8-year-old Cindy in her bedroom. The apparition reportedly was childlike and repeated over and over again that there were 7 dead soldiers buried in the wall. Honestly, really creepy. Rhode Island, where the house is, was once the battleground between British, American and French forces in the 1778 Battle of Rhode Island. Now, this battle killed 68 people and left a further 68 missing. The house, as you may or may not know, was established in 1736, so perhaps the soldiers buried here are from the times of conflict seen in the eastern New England states. Coming in at number 7, we have the bangs and the shakes. The most common occurrences in the house are said to be banging doors and objects shaking of their own free will, at times even the house shaking. Now, the Perron children said that they would be awoken to spirits shaking their bed, and occasionally they'd wake up to the odd hair yank or leg yank. Not nice. The new owners of the home have also reiterated that the house does indeed shake. Now, an earthquake in Rhode Island is pretty unusual but not unheard of, although it seems that this quake only affected the Harrisville farm. Coming into number 6, we have the phantom flies. In Andrea Perron's book, she wrote that the house would be suddenly and inexplicably infested with flies at strange times. She explained that the houseflies would appear deep in the middle of winter. Flies, of course, are far more common in the warm, humid months of the year, and for those of you familiar with the harsh winters of New England, it certainly isn't the climate there. Andrea referred to these flies as the devil's pets, and she claimed that there would be so many of them that they would form little fly clumps, which sounds horrifying. In her book, she wrote clusters of them would huddle together as if plotting the next move. She claimed it was far more than an infestation. She said it was a manifestation. She added that, strangely, the flies would disappear as soon as they appeared. When the Warrens arrived to investigate the house, Lorraine claimed that the flies were actually there with a purpose. They were an omen, a harbinger of evil to come. Blimey. Next up, we have the uninvited guests. What are you realistically more scared of? Ghost intruders or real intruders? In America, a place of guns. The whole Conjuring saga deals with unwanted spirits. It turns out the owners before the most recent were utterly plagued by creepy fans trying to catch a glimpse of the supposedly haunted house. Former owner Norma Sutcliffe spoke out against the intruders. She said the biggest fear is every day that we live with the fact that we don't know what may happen. She said that she received calls in the middle of the night and threats that people were going to burn down her house because of its full evil. Norma claimed that she did not believe the house was haunted and had lived in peace in the property since 1987. That peace was disturbed when the Conjuring movie franchise shone a light on her home. Speaking to Inside Edition, Norma said,
"They think they have a right, and that makes me so angry. We no longer have any sense of peace. No privacy is totally gone.
She also claimed that strangers have pulled down her fence, which is a lot to deal with. Next up, we have the blood orange. In Andrea's book, she discusses the haunted kitchen in more detail. It seems that there is one particularly horrifying story from the room involving a time that food in the home was, I guess poisoned with evil? Is that what we're going with? I think it is. She claims that her mother Carolyn started peeling an orange when she saw blood trickling from it. At first, she thought she'd accidentally cut herself with the knife that she was peeling with, but then she couldn't find a wound. To keep her youngest daughters from wandering in and becoming frightened, allegedly she hastily cleaned up the blood from the skin and the floor and threw the orange in the bin. Some skeptics believe that the orange was just a California blood orange, but honestly, I've had a blood orange, delicious, and its juice doesn't look or smell anything like actual blood. It would be difficult to mistake the two. Next up, we have the Arnolds. Before the Perron family moved into the home, it was known as the Old Arnold Farm. It seems that 8 generations of the Arnold family lived and died in the house. Emphasis on the died. It seems that the Arnolds were met with a lot of bad luck and untimely deaths. It's claimed that a lot of the previous residents died under suspicious circumstances or committed suicide. It is said that one of the previous tenants, 93-year-old Mrs. Arnold, hung herself in the barn. This narrative has actually been crossed with the story of Bathsheba, the witch in the movie The Conjuring, and is referenced in this scene. The Perron family believed that one of the spirits that haunted the home was that of Johnny Arnold, who allegedly committed suicide there. It's said that he would watch over the family. He was a benevolent presence. He would appear to the children, but as soon as they made eye contact with him, he'd disappear. Coming into number 2, we have the seance. One of the scariest moments in the Conjuring movie is the seance in the basement. It seems that this is based on the real life event when Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the house. Andrea speaks about it in her books, and she's also spoken about it in a number of on-air interviews, including for San Antonio Living in 2014. She said that the real seance took place in the dining room and was much scarier than anything shown into the movie.
There was a seance that happened when the Warrens were in the house with you. What happened during that seance?
It was far more intense than anything that they could have portrayed on film.
Andrea said that the medium accidentally invited something nasty into the home.
Inadvertently opened a door that they could not close. The medium invited the spirits in, and with them came something which attacked my mother.
Andrea continued by saying, "Whatever attacked my mother was not of this world. It spoke through her in a language that was not of this planet." Terrifying, right? Nothing, though, is more terrifying than the legend of Bathsheba Sherman. The Harrisville house is allegedly haunted by a number of ghosts, some of which we've already discussed. The most prominent, however, is Bathsheba Sherman. Born in Rhode Island, the woman married fellow Rhode Islander Judson Sherman in 1844, and later the pair had 3 children that died before the age of 7 and a surviving child, Herbert. Suspicion around Bathsheba grew. A lot of people thought the woman was a witch. This happened when a child mysteriously died in her care. It seems that the child's head had been stabbed with a sewing needle. Bathsheba died an old woman, and it's said that her body literally turned to stone on her death. Witch. When the Perron family lived on the property, the mother Carolyn said that she was sitting on the sofa once when she felt like she'd been stabbed. She looked down and she had a wound. When she examined it, it looked as if a large sewing needle had impaled her. When Ed and Lorraine Warren visited the home, they claimed to have strongly felt the witch's presence. It's said that Bathsheba Sherman cursed the land so that whoever lived on it in the future would die. I guess we're all destined to die though, so I don't know. Okay, so all this being said, it seems like the Harrisville haunting was actually kind of nothing, because when asked to compare the Harrisville farmhouse to the Amityville house, another famous Ed and Lorraine Warren case, it seems that Lorraine Warren had this to say: "Amityville was horrible, honey. It was absolutely horrible." She said, "It followed us straight across the country. I don't even like to talk about it. I'll never go to the Amityville house again. You don't know how long my career is, and that is the only one." So yeah, I guess Harrisville is not a patch on Amityville, so instead of making a part 2 to this video, perhaps we ought to create a top 10 scary occurrences that happened at the real life Amityville house. I don't know though, I'm kinda scared. Maybe I'll need even more colour for that video.
If People say, this guy's going back into the medieval ages. There are no such things as devils or demons. Yes, there are. When we went into the house that day, we didn't realize that it was diabolically infested. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I would have to say that Amityville was a 10.
We're right. It all started out looking like there could have been human spirits. They would see human spirits. Even our researchers witnessed human spirits. But there was something altogether different. Besides that human element, there was something inhuman or very, very negative.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Connecticut poltergeist. I found a video clip of Ed and Lorraine investigating the haunting of a Connecticut home. This haunting was later the basis for the movie The Haunting in Connecticut, because they were being haunted in Connecticut. It makes so much sense. Ed Warren says that this is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for poltergeist activity caught on camera. The family were being plagued by ghostly activity and wanted help, so they called demonologists. It seems in the footage Ed is holding a seance to contact a spirit. This is what happens when he asks who's there.
1 knock for yes, 2 for no. Are you a man? Are you a boy?
Then this is what happens when asked if the young spirit wants the family to leave.
You want the people in this house to move? 1 knock for yes, 2 for no. Yes.
The Warrens also recorded this footage of the poltergeist moving chairs.
Give me some sign.
Later, the poltergeist is shown trying to pull a chair out from under a child. Years later, Lorraine was interviewed about the house and she said the spirits were cleared with an exorcism. She also said this.
There was a very old tree that was right in front of this house. There was no wind at all, no wind whatsoever, and the tree broke in half.
Coming into number 9, we have the White Lady of Union Cemetery. Ed and Lorraine have investigated many cases and usually have been the duo behind the case's fame. The White Lady of Union Cemetery long since outdates and surpasses the Warrens. Nonetheless, the pair did have a scary moment there and even caught a ghost on camera. The cemetery is in eastern Connecticut and the site dates back to the 1700s. The graveyard is said to be haunted by a plethora of ghosts, the White Lady being just one of them. Ed stayed in the graveyard for 7 nights and saw ghost lights filling up the place. He said on September 1st, 1990, he experienced something particularly scary. He said he heard a woman weeping. He said shadow ghosts tried to stop the woman getting to him, and this was the photo he took. This is what he had to say.
Your stereotype ghost right here.
Isn't that beautiful?
The electromagnetic energy taken from the plant life in the cemetery is used by the spirit to form this image.
Coming into number 8, we have the devil. Ed and Lorraine Warren met the devil and they testified to it. This all went down in 1981 when they were called into a murder trial. Arnie Cheyenne Johnson claimed to have killed his landlord because the devil made him do it. It all started with a possessed 11-year-old, David Glatzel. This is where Ed and Lorraine first stepped into the picture. The pair were called in to try and rid the boy of the demon along with Catholic priests. Over several days, the group did eventually get rid of the demon. However, according to them, the demon fled into his brother, 18-year-old Arnie's body. Oof. A few months later, he killed his landlord in an argument. His defense lawyer argued that he was possessed. Now here is a clip of Ed talking about Arnie.
And he screamed at these devils, take me on. Leave my little buddy alone. He got his wish.
He challenged the demonic.
He challenged the demonic.
Then he says this about when he became possessed.
And Arnie disappeared for a few minutes. When he came back, he was somebody entirely different.
Ed and Lorraine spoke at his trial and attested to the fact that he was indeed possessed by the devil. Thus ensued a media blitz around the case. The pair then wrote a book called The Devil in Connecticut following the incident. Arnie Cheyenne Johnson served just 5 years in jail. Coming into number 7, we have the Borley Rectory. According to demonologists, ghost hunters and psychics like Ed and Lorraine, the Borley Rectory is the most haunted place in the United Kingdom. The building was was constructed in Victorian times in Essex, and rumours of its hauntings were rife from the very beginning. Ghost hunters claimed the activity is related to a Benedictine monastery built in the area in 1362. A monk was said to have been executed, and a nun bricked alive in the walls of a convent after the pair had an affair. Obviously, good old Ed and Lorraine had to go for a jaunt to check it out. When talking about their first experience at the property, Lorraine said that she was with a skeptical newspaper reporter. She shares an experience of what happened to him.
Something is hitting me. It's hitting me. It's hitting me. And he was absolutely hysterical.
Ugh, a hitting ghost, not what you need. Then she continued by saying,
He said, I can't breathe. I can't breathe.
Later, Lorraine said that a recording taken at the church at this moment revealed a woman's voice saying,
Hit him, almost in a healing way. And you hear her very gentle voice.
Chilling. Was the monk hitting him because the nun wanted him to? Coming into number 6, we have The Witch of Harrisville. Some of you guys may have seen The Conjuring. Well, that horrifying movie is based on a house that the Warrens investigated in Rhode Island. Now, this house was haunted by a witch called Bathsheba Sherman. She is said to have cursed the land so that whoever lived on it in the future would die. What a babe. One of the Perron family members, Andrea, discusses her time in the house. In this clip, she's talking about her sister.
And the door opened to the pantry, and April looked up at my mother and she said, Mommy, something really bad happened in there. Indeed. It's where little Prudence Arnold had her throat cut.
Ed and Lorraine visited the home and exorcised the witch. Or did they? When members from the Ed and Lorraine Warren Museum visited Bathsheba's grave, this is what they heard.
Don't be scared.
Kill. Ooh, did you get... Who are you gonna kill?
Coming into number 5, we have the Enfield Poltergeist. The Enfield Poltergeist was a case investigated by Ed and Lorraine in 1977. The pair travelled to England to investigate the rumoured haunted home in North London. They deduced the mysterious goings-on were a result of demonic possession. The residents recorded sounds that took place in a bedroom after their children had gone to bed. Now, bear in mind, in the 70s, not a lot of people had video recording equipment or even audio recording equipment.
All the lights gone out. Oh. Where's the light?
It's right the lamp.
On the head.
Right way across the room. And pulled it out of the socket.
So we hear screaming and confusion as the lights go out. It seems as if a lamp was pulled out of the socket. Then this happens.
Who's that shaking the door? Oh. What's on there? Mum's laughing. Where is it? Oh!
It seems a slipper was used as a projectile by some kind of ghoul and thrown across the room. Over a period of 18 months, more than 30 people, including neighbours, fellow psychic researchers and journalists, said that they saw furniture moving of its own accord and objects being thrown across the room. It was even said that one of the children in the house levitated. Spooky. The events that took place in this Enfield house make up the inspiration behind The Conjuring 2. Coming into number 4, very famous, we have Amityville. In a 2013 interview, Lorraine Warren said that this case haunted her the most. She said, I will never go in the Amityville house again. What happened in this house that made a self-confessed expert demonologist scared to return? The story goes that in 1974, 23-year-old Ronald J. Defoe Jr. murdered his entire family when they slept at their home in Amityville. He killed 6 people. Now, these were said to be his 4 siblings and his parents. He said he heard voices that told him to do it. After a year, the house was eventually purchased for just $80,000, although the buyers, the Lutz family, stayed just 28 days because of the horror they experienced. George and Kathy Lutz said that they saw slime coming out of the walls, knives being thrown from counters, figures wandering and wailing. George even said that he saw his wife levitating and an evil red-eyed pig-like creature glaring at him. Ed and Lorraine were brought in along with a priest to rid the house of spirits. In an interview, Ed said,
When we went into the house that day, we didn't realize that it was diabolically infested. And on a scale of 1 to 10, I would have to say that Amityville was a 10.
Oh my god. The pair believed that it was the house that cursed the murderer rather than the murderer that cursed the house. Today, there have been 18 different films about the home. Okay, because Amityville was so scary it gets 2 points of its very own. We have The Ghost Boy at number 3. This picture was taken by Ed Warren as he investigated the Amityville house. The picture shows what appears to be a demonic boy. The Warrens suspected it could be one of the youngest children with his eyes glowing from the infrared film. The Warrens believe that this is one of the most credible pieces of evidence for ghosts ever caught on camera. Honestly, it gives me chills to look at this picture. Coming into number 2, we have the very famous Annabelle doll. So many of you will know the horrifying story of Annabelle, a possessed real doll behind the Annabelle and Conjuring franchise. Ed and Lorraine were called upon by 2 young women to deal with an out-of-control Raggedy Ann doll. The doll then became infamous for being demonically possessed, perpetuating the trope for the demon dolly. Annabelle lives in a locked case in the Warrens Occult Museum. Now there isn't any video evidence of the doll being a menace, but things did get pretty scary recently when the doll was moved in a Facebook Live video. On hand at the Warrens Museum were Dan Rivera and Tony Sepra, who were handling the move. Dan says this about Annabelle.
The most diabolical, most haunted, most evil item in the occult museum.
And he is also charged with moving the doll. Tony explains how Dan has made it safe to move Annabelle here.
As long as your skin is not going to be in contact with the aura of that doll, which is touching the surface of the doll with your human hands. You don't want to do that.
Before the doll is moved, the pair pray.
Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the malice and snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray. And do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, thrust into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who wander through the world for the ruin of souls. Amen.
Okay, watch as they move the doll now, it's really tense.
Okay, quickly. Right over here. Go into the new case.
They then pray again, and also tell a story about a guy who provoked Annabelle by tapping on her case. According to the duo, the man died that evening in a bike accident. Okay, finally, arguably one of the most haunted places in the world, a truly terrifying place. I'm not sure I'd even ever set foot in it. We have the Occult Museum. So this is one of the scariest things that Ed and Lorraine ever experienced together. This was the creation of their Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut. This is what Lorraine said about the place when she was leading a tour of her home.
You're in probably one of the most haunted places in the world because of the things that are in here. Everything in here has been taken from some place where people are either killed or maimed or so many ways. So it's tragic for me.
So basically it's the culmination of all of their scary cases in one. In the museum you can find Annabelle, no thanks, and the Conjuring mirror, and way more. She says you should never ever touch anything in the museum. Now despite living with Annabelle in the museum, this is Lorraine's reaction when she walks by her.
This is the worst thing in here, is that doll. I'm not gonna stare at it though. So you can take the picture, but I'm not going to stare at it because that has done bad harm on a lot of people.
A priest circulates the museum daily to bless the space.
Father, of the Son, of the Holy Spirit, amen.
What has been done is circular embolism, which is prayers, are said all the time, to pray.
Yeah, it's pretty intense.